What is going on, Guardians, and welcome back to another Destiny gameplay video. Hey, in this video I just wanted to share some of my tips and strategies for using throwing knives on the Gunslinger subclass effectively. Now, first and foremost, I'll tell you that I'm using my Gunslinger equipment build, and if you haven't seen my video on that, then I'll go ahead and link that in the description. It's going to show you everything about my intellect, discipline, and strength, what armor I'm using, how it's spec'd, what exotic armor I'm using, what the skill tree looks like, and that's going to help you understand how I'm using this build a little bit better. But just a quick overview, I'm using Knife Juggler. I get 2 throwing knives basically, and anytime I get a precision kill with them, it's going to automatically cool them down. And here you'll see how that's helpful. So I only have 1 throwing knife cooled down right now, but I'm going to challenge this guy, a 1 shot with the pistol, and then followed up with a throwing knife, instantly cools it down so that I can chuck one at this guy as he's getting shots on my teammate who is calling for help. Now, the first tactic I want to talk about is the strengths of this sort of bait and switch sort of an approach to using throwing knives. Now here you see there's a guy close on my radar. I'm using this truck for cover, but I'm trying to bait him in because I want to encourage people to try and push me with their shotguns, because a lot of players are rushing shotgunners. It's just, you know, the nature of the game right now. There's a lot of them out there. So if you can sort of encourage them to try and push you with their close quarters weapons and backpedal, that's a great way of encouraging them to see he pushes in with a shotgun. And I just backpedal. I'm going 1 shot with the primary and then throw the throwing knife. And that works. These guys got a shotgun as well. So trying to encourage them to expose them, sort of make themselves vulnerable for a short period of time. This guy switches to his shotgun. This guy rushes with a shotgun. But just sort of encouraging these players to pull out their shotguns or even their fusion rifles. And that's a little bit of time and distance that you have to work with. So once you've baited them into switching to those weapons, you can backpedal and throw a throwing knife. I always go 1 shot with the primary and then throw the throwing knife. Sometimes I'll go with 2 shots to the primary if I haven't taken any damage yet and I don't feel sort of that pressure to get the quick kill. But that's sort of my approach to that sort of bait and switch tactic, and it works out really, really well. And one last example here, as I pull up my primary, shoot a guy once, and backpedal for the throwing knife kill. So the next thing I want to talk about is the importance of elevation. Elevation really matters when it comes to throwing knife accuracy. So here I have an elevated position on the guy. That's going to help me be more accurate with that throwing knife. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to give you more headshots with your throwing knives than body shots. And let me talk about why that's so. So the thing is, when you jump up and you have elevation, what that does is it makes it so that the head is a larger fraction of the overall hitbox. When you're looking at someone head on, the head is a small part of the hitbox up on top of their, on top of their body. Obviously, that's where your head is located. I'm not sure you knew that. But when you jump up in the air and you get elevation on these guys, what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that their head makes up a larger portion of their overall hitbox that's visible to you from that angle. So you're more likely going to hit the head than the body at that point. And you can see in this freeze frame that I did here, you can see just how much of that overall hitbox the head is taking up. And that's a good portion of it. That's pretty much half of the hitbox. So elevation really matters. Make sure that if you have the opportunity to do so without exposing yourself to a different player, jump up in the air and use that as a means of being more accurate with those throwing knives. You saw me there on Widow's Court using the stairs. Stairs are a great place to use throwing knives as you're looking down at people. Anytime you have an elevated position, that's a great time to use throwing knives. So keep that in mind. Now, another tactic that I picked up on by watching in year 1, Sir Demetrius used the Gunslinger, because he used to use Gunslinger quite a bit in year 1. One of the things I picked up from him is that sometimes you can use throwing knives when you don't even have line of sight on somebody. But if you have a general idea of, like, especially a choke point or a hallway, a doorway, something that they're going to come through, and he talks about this in one of his videos in year 1. If I find it, I'll link it. But here you see blind firing one up over cover like that. If you know the general vicinity where they're going to be, sometimes it's worth just tossing a throwing knife in that direction and crossing your fingers. And if you actually hit someone with it, and you have a decent chance of doing it if you throw it at the right time and in the right area. I threw it at that opening of the hallway there where a couple of guys were, so I know I had a pretty decent shot at hitting one of them. And it paid off in huge dividends. Gives me a kill, and then we're actually able to capture the objective and then push out and get the win. But so yeah, sometimes it's worth doing that because you don't expose yourself, and it's a risk and reward thing. If you actually hit it, then it can really pay off in some pretty huge dividends. The next thing I want to talk about is the advantage of throwing a throwing knife and then breaking line of sight, and then maybe re-engaging if you need to. So here's a good example. I'm going to step up on this guy to challenge him, and I see this trip mine. It's red. I feel like I could be potentially in a lot of danger here, so I go ahead and throw the throwing knife and duck into cover. Luckily, it finishes him off, and I can move on to the next target. But sometimes that's not going to be the case, and here's another good example of that. So I'm going to push up with my Goldie and miss one shot because I suck at life. Now I've got one target here, and I'm primed. One more good shot, and I'm dead. So I just throw the throwing knife and break line of sight. And so from here, I can see whether or not my throwing knife hit because I got the hit markers in the reticle. I see the damage indicator on the right showing me precision damage. So I know I can just re-engage, and I just need to get one shot on the guy. So that's one of the greatest strengths of throwing knives that often gets overlooked, is their ability to do damage without exposing you. So you can always just throw it and then duck into cover if you need to. Wait and see if it does damage, if you get a damage indicator, if you see the numbers pop up, and that can sort of inform your next move. So you can chuck it, see if it hits, and then re-engage if you need to. So make sure you're taking advantage of that ability of the throwing knife. It's just like any other equipment like grenades. You can chuck it and take cover and wait for it to do damage, and it's something that you don't have to be exposed for. And lastly, I find that throwing knives pair very well with hand cannons. They do a lot of damage in a single bullet, and that's really what can give you the ticket to the one shot, one throwing knife kills, and that pays off in some pretty good dividends. So you can use anything. You can use a scout, you can use an auto rifle, you can use a pulse rifle, whatever you want to use, whatever you're most comfortable with. But for the way that I play throwing knives, using lots of vertical space, using my elevation like I talked about, hand cannons have the best accuracy from the air of any primary, so they pair very well with it. So in summation, just remember, use the bait and switch tactic, use your elevation to make the hitbox on the head bigger, use your vertical space. I talk about it all the time. Feel free to blind fire if you have an idea of choke points that people might be coming through. Sometimes it pays off to blind fire a throwing knife. And lastly, make sure that you break line of sight if you need to, because throwing knives can do damage without necessarily exposing yourself. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Hopefully these tips have been helpful, and I will catch you in the Crucible.